Good morning. I am Julie from Mundo de Pepita, and I welcome you here for our Periscope presentation. Good morning, welcome. So as I said, my name is Julie, and I am co-owner of Hola Jill of Mundo de Pepita, resources for teaching Spanish to children. Please feel free to share out on social media. And again, welcome. I really appreciate you joining us here today on Periscope. Hola, nice to see you. Hola, Emily. If you type in your name, that also helps me. But I just want to say welcome. Hola, hola. And I'm so glad to have everyone here. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it. Hola, hi. So today what we're going to have is a conversation around building a theme for an elementary language program. But certainly the process that I'm going to share can be used for any age level. I will probably mention, hola, hola. For any age level, I've gone through this same process with my adult students for my Russian classes. So it's not specific to any one language or grade level, though I am going to focus in on elementary. Welcome. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. Again, as I said, my name is Julie, and I am a co-owner of Mundo de Pepita, resources for teaching Spanish to children. You can definitely watch the replay of this scope on Periscope for the next 24 hours, I think it is. But we're also going to upload this to our YouTube channel, Mundo de Pepita, so you can go back and look at it then. And I also will have a written copy in our Teachers Pay Teachers store. You can click on teacher resources along the left-hand side. Oh, they stay on Periscope forever. I did not know that. Thank you so much for saying that. Good to know. So you can come back to Periscope. I will have that written copy up by the end of the weekend in our Teachers Pay Teachers store, Mundo de Pepita. So as I said, and again, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much. I'm going to talk about building a theme from start to finish, giving you some concrete examples for how I go through the process myself. And hopefully that gives you some tips and ideas as you're building your own themes. Please feel free to ask any questions or comments. If I don't respond really quickly or at all, it's probably because I haven't seen it on the screen. The text is small. I'm going to try really hard. Hola, welcome. I'm going to try really hard to do some strategic pauses so that I can look at the camera and see what questions or comments are there. Also, you can tap your screen to create those hearts. You can tap right along the bottom, and that's a great way for me to know what is resonating with you. So, welcome. Again, we're going to talk about building a theme. So, I wanted to share, first of all, some things that I think about as I go about developing the idea, that bigger idea of what theme it's going to be. There are several things that are important to me around building a theme. Obviously, we want that theme to be motivating for our students, and at the same time, I want it to meet a goal where they're moving along, they're moving forward in their language learning. So being interested to participate, we want that, right, in the activities. That's part of that process of choosing the activities for your theme. And that we're moving along in language proficiency. Thank you so much for sharing. Obviously, at the novice level, the young levels, we're talking about baby steps moving forward. But with upper levels, you might see greater leaps with your students. But either way, both of those things coming together, welcome, as you're building a theme. There are also a few overarching ideas and concepts that are really important for me. I'm looking for themes that can be contextualized. Rather than lists of words. Sometimes you see a theme in a textbook, for example. I remember when I was in high school where there was a theme, but it was really just a list of words that you had to learn in phrases and chunks, but and they kind of connected, but I really want it to be as contextualized as possible. As my delivery mode, I'm striving for 90% in the target language, which I have to say can sometimes be a challenge, definitely at elementary school, but for all of us. But that does mean that I want my theme to be comprehensible. It has to be in order for them to understand in 90%. So that might affect what I choose to teach, what my themes are going to be, what themes I'm going to pick, and what those activities underneath that umbrella are going to be. I am also a huge proponent of delivering content through the foreign language as opposed to just teaching the language itself. So things like science, geography, math, any nonfiction types of topics like biographies of famous people, some maybe simple historical components at the elementary level. As you teach older kiddos, you can certainly get into that in greater detail. But those types of content pieces, either choosing a theme that is specifically a content-based or incorporating content-based instruction within a theme, really increases the motivation for little kids in particular. The other thing that I want to take into consideration is how I can reach all of my learners. Thinking about Gardner's multiple intelligences, learning styles, such as visual learners, our auditory learners, whether my students are special ed. Sometimes I have a class that is comprised of a fair amount of special ed kids if our classes sometimes are unbalanced. So some years I may modify a theme to be able to allow for success for those kiddos too. I'm certainly going to take into consideration the age level of my students. And if I'm talking about my kindergartners in particular, I want to incorporate more movement activities, activities which foster self-control, taking turns, etc., those social and school skills on top of the language learning goals. As many of you who teach kindergarten know, they're a completely different group of little friends, and they need some really special instruction to make it a success for them. So I'm going to expand on that. Thank you. I'm going to expand on that in a moment, getting more specific in terms of the types of activities underneath the theme. But first I'm going to give an idea, or we're going to talk a little bit about how I decide on the theme and then go from there. So any questions or comments before I continue? I really do want to be sure that I can address any that you have. All right, so thinking about what themes we could choose. When I first started my program 18.5 years ago, I tried really hard to match the themes that were going on in the gen ed classroom. I was a traveling teacher, the fun. I finally got my own classroom 6 years ago, but before that, oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and I hope that there are some good pieces of information in this today for you. So when I was a traveling teacher, I was going room to room into other teachers' classrooms, and so I did a lot of the themes that I developed at that time were ones that were also going on in the gen ed classroom. So for example, when kindergarten was doing farm in the gen ed classroom, I was doing farm in Spanish class. If the first graders were doing rainforest, I was doing rainforest. And there were some real advantages to that, especially when you're in the classroom, in someone else's classroom. With permission, you can use their visuals, you can use their manipulatives, you can kind of co-opt those for your classroom. And for the most part, that worked out relatively well. Unfortunately, I had to start evolving away from that to a certain extent, and for a couple of reasons. One being that the gen ed classroom teachers themselves started changing their themes for another variety of reasons. So rainforest actually went out the window. My first grade teachers, they don't teach rainforest any longer. And then the other piece of it was that I found that sometimes within even just one grade level, the teachers within that grade level were not all teaching a theme at the same time. And so that became really difficult for me to coordinate my instruction because I wasn't able to tap into what was going on in the gen ed classroom. And on top of that, as time has gone on, I've had the opportunity to really develop and evolve my curriculum. And so I wanted to develop themes that were more specific to Spanish. So for example, in second grade now, I do a theme on Frida Kahlo. Around the holidays, I teach, focus in on El Día de los Reyes Magos, the Three Kings, far more so than Santa Claus. We do talk a little bit about Christmas, but we really focus in on the Three Kings. Nevertheless, when you're choosing themes or brainstorming, hola Connie, when you're brainstorming or thinking about theme topics, the Gen Ed classroom is a really great place to develop some inspiration. Looking around at what they are doing, what they're teaching kids is going to give you an idea of what is motivating or of high interest for kids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start basically from scratch right now and walk you through how I build a theme. And this is the process that I go through for all of my themes, whether it be elementary school. As I mentioned earlier, I taught Russian to adults for about 13 years. Hola, oh, qué bueno, hola chica. And I would develop themes for my Russian classes too. And this is the process that I go through to create all of our activity packs for Mundo de Pepita, which really are a theme all in themselves. So, of course, the idea of a theme is that you have a central idea, a concept, a topic, an essential question with the activities supporting the theme. So if you're looking at your writing activities, your reading, movement, songs, poems, projects, visuals, all of that would be geared toward the theme. And the theme, of course, gives you the talking point, the place to start off and build from and then extend from. But you've got that context that supports what you're doing in class and what you're talking about. So I will do a strategic pause for a moment. I just want to really be able to give people an opportunity to ask questions if they have them. Now, this next step, and this is perhaps the biggest tip I can give you, the meat of it as it were, is something that I cannot take credit for. It's not my original idea, but when I started my program in the late 90s, I came across the idea of a thematic web in a NEL journal, National Network for Early Language Learning. They're an incredible organization geared toward, thank you for those hearts, they're an incredible organization for early language learning. They're very strong advocates of early language programs. Please check them out online. Join if you can. They have an incredible amount of resources, and as I said, they're geared toward elementary, which is wonderful. So the idea behind a thematic web is that it's a brainstorming session for you. You are going to brainstorm anything that you can think of. Any good ideas, bad ideas, ideas, resources, activities, it doesn't matter. You're going to throw and write up anything you can think about onto your thematic web. So first you have to start with a working title. And that working title is going to go into the middle, and I'm going to show you you can see behind me a thematic web that I created, and I'm going to show you that in greater detail in just a moment. But you're going to put a working title in the middle of your thematic web. This may not end up being your theme. I have found that as I've created thematic webs, I have discovered along that process that the central piece that I put in there was good, but off on one side was something even better, or that I had more resources for, or that met some learning goals that I really wanted to provide for my students. And so the thematic web can evolve, and your theme creation process, your theme development process can evolve as you go through your thematic web. Certainly theme ideas of high interest for elementary school. I think the biggest one is animals. Whether that be groups of animals, like I do a theme in kindergarten for the zoo animals, or whether, or farm is another great, very popular one, or it could be an individual animal that you base a whole theme around. So in second grade, I do a theme around butterflies. In the past, I have done a frog theme. I've done a rabbit theme. You could do it either way with animals. Dinosaurs, pets, they want to talk about their pets so much, they love their pets. Family, you could do biographies of famous people. I mentioned before that I do a theme around Frida Kahlo. Science topics, anything nonfiction is, as I said, really great. Those types of theme ideas that are really popular for little kids, and of course then there are some real traditional ones, clothes, seasons, different types of food. I do a theme in 3rd grade around desserts. There's, an endless array of possibilities. Thank you for those hearts. So I'm going to show you a thematic web that I created for 3rd grade, which I started with the working title of Outer Space. And this is very much a highly motivating and interesting topic for elementary students, and one of my favorites, actually. So let me just raise it, and then I'm going to bring you a little bit closer so that I can show you how I created it and what's on the thematic web. One moment. Okay. So I'm going to bring you with me to the thematic web where I didn't think about it. I hope that's not backwards for you. Could be. Good thing I'm going to read it for you. So in the center, I put outer space. And that's how you start. I'm so sorry that is backward. I will have a copy of this on the written. Oh, it's not. Oh, great. It looks backwards to me. Thank you so much. Okay. I will have a written copy of this on in our Teachers Pay Teachers store, Mundo de Pepita, a free download of this transcript script, essentially. Welcome. So that you can see that in more detail. But I'm so glad that it's not backwards. Thank you so much. So the center is outer space. That's my working title. And then what you're going to do is, as I said, this is a brainstorming session for you. You're going to start drawing spokes off of the central theme. And you're just brainstorming anything you can think of that has to do with that working title. So outer space I have here. And then over here I started, okay, well, outer space, solar system, right? And then what could come off of the solar system? Comets, the moon, stars, planets, and from those spokes, I created even more spokes. So off the solar system, as I said, comets, the moon. Then I started thinking about other things that might have to do with the moon, like the phases of the moon, legends, Aztec or Mayan legends, the rabbit in the moon, comparing and contrasting those legends. Again, remember that, and I might have forgotten to say this, I'm really sorry, when you're brainstorming, this does not necessarily mean, thank you very much, this doesn't necessarily mean everything that you are actually going to do. Or only the things that you can think of that, oh yes, I would definitely do this in my room. What these activities are, or whatever you put on your thematic web, is just brainstorming. We're going to take this and go a next step after it is created. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We were talking about building a theme for elementary school, and we're looking at a thematic web and how to create that as the first step in developing your theme. So as we have outer space here and we start to have other spokes off of solar system, I have the stars and things that might come off of that. So I have a song, Estrellita, wishing upon a star, constellations. The sun, of course, is a star. Welcome. Pocoyo has a video, Brilla Brilla. Welcome, thank you so much for joining us. Then I came over to planets, and I could think of a lot for planets. And don't forget, I will just say this reminder, if I don't answer a question right away, please repost it. It just means I haven't seen it. I'm very sorry. Yo soy de Nueva York. Gracias por la pregunta. So here we are in planets, and I start brainstorming ideas. So size of planets, color, there's a Los Planetas song. That's an authentic resource, which is really great to teach the names of the planets. What is your favorite planet? Welcome, thank you so much for joining us. That could be an interpersonal activity. Thank you so much. We could put the planets in order. There's some science. We could have, Zamba. Hola, welcome, thank you so much. Zamba is a series of cartoons for children from Argentina, and there are several videos about outer space. They're really incredible, and even though kiddos are not necessarily able to comprehend every single piece, there's a lot that you can pull from it, which is really wonderful. If you're doing the order of the planets, you can then incorporate ordinal numbers, etc. Is it a planet? Who knows? We're talking about Pluton right now, Pluto. It, of course, has been demoted. How sad. How many moons a planet has, or rings, craters, etc. The makeup of the planets, whether they're gaseous, solid, frozen, where would you like to go? All of those things were brainstorming ideas that I thought of coming off of planets. Again, remembering that creating your thematic web does not necessarily mean you're going to use all of these activities. It's just a way for you to start thinking about your theme. Other spokes that came off of outer space for me were astronauts. So, of course, because astronauts do go out into outer space, you could have the suit, and that would be clothes. You could add clothes to that type of conversation. Famous astronauts, first on the moon. Ooh, I should put this magnet here. That will help. Sorry. First in space, when I was teaching Russian to children, we talked about Laika, the little dog that went out into outer space, the first being, actually. And the first human in space was Yuri Gagarin from Russia. So if you were teaching Russian, that might be a really cool topic to do. Professions, what do you want to do when you grow up? Building off of an astronaut. What do they eat? This is where I was getting a little... I didn't even know where to go with this, but I'm just brainstorming ideas and throwing them on the thematic web. Telescopes, photos from the Hubble telescope, for example. Again, just brainstorming. I came over here to aliens. That was a big spoke, and lots of ideas from that. Create your own alien. Body parts, clothes, size, what do they like to eat? A Martian family, maybe. Questions here for maybe older kids. Is there life in outer space? Do they come to Earth? Mars and Martians. Poco Joc has a great episode. Well, it's actually a full-length movie. El Circo Espacial, which incorporates aliens. It's hilarious. I love that. Of course, E.T., our favorite alien. And up here you can see spaceships. So design your own spaceship. That would be really fun. Different types of spaceships. Shuttle, rocket, an alien ship. Welcome. Thank you so much. So again, as I said, we're just brainstorming as many ideas as I can. And then over here, the last spoke is what I termed intergalactic travel. A trip into outer space. Plot a trip. Make a travel brochure for being out in space. Thank you so much. Write an itinerary. What would you pack? So there's clothes again, right? In search of something, doing a scavenger hunt in outer space. Welcome, thank you so much. We're looking at a thematic web and how we can use that, the process to create that, so we can use it to develop a theme. Intergalactic travel, Star Wars, we all love Star Wars. Lost in space, Poco Joc has a video, Perdidos en el Espacio. That's really hilarious. I do incorporate that. I'll talk more about that. And again, Zamba, again, from Argentina, has a number of authentic videos that have to do with outer space. So that is the thematic web that I created. I'm trying to come back a little bit so you can see that in its entirety. Thank you. And again, I will have a physical copy in our store, Teachers Pay Teachers, Mundo de Pepita, along with a write-up of today's conversation. That should be available by the end of the weekend. Okay, so I'm going to take you back. De nada. I'm going to take you back over here. Let me just situate my camera. Welcome. Thank you so much. So after I've gone through the process of creating this thematic web, de nada, muchas gracias a usted. Now I'm going to start to do a little bit more work. Hola, hello, thank you for joining. This, as I said, the thematic web is a brainstorming session to give you ideas to just come up with whatever you can think about your chosen theme. Now, and excuse me for 1 second, I just have to get one little sip of water. Thank you for your patience. So we've got our thematic web, and before we do anything else, what we're going to do is start to work backwards. You want to determine what your goals are for the theme. Okay? What is it that you want your students, welcome, what is it that you want your students to be able to do at the end of the theme? What skills do you want to reinforce? As you look at your thematic web, does anything pop out to you? Thinking about whether you want your theme, ooh, that's really rude, and I'm so sorry to everyone. You're going to be thinking about, do you want a listening comprehension theme? Do you want to hone in on interpersonal skills? Do you want to further a particular structure or vocabulary set? What are the goals that you want to achieve or for your students to achieve at the end of your theme? Once you've made that determination, this is going to help you to analyze your thematic web and pare it down. Welcome, thank you. The idea being that, as I said before, this is your brainstorm, but you're not necessarily going to use everything on that thematic web. There is a lot that I put up here on the thematic web, but that does not mean that I'm going to use all of it. So, you're going to pull from the web the ideas and activities that work for you to have your students meet the goals that you establish. You're going to pick certain spokes but not others perhaps, and even parts of spokes in order to develop your theme. So as I said, I made this thematic web for 3rd grade. And my primary goal in developing this theme was to give my students an opportunity to create their own version of our mini book story with some sub-goals of practicing previous vocabulary that they've learned and learning a very high-frequency structure, to go to with destinations, which is going to tap into vocabulary chunks that they learned in 2nd grade as well. So, those are the goals that I developed that I wanted to achieve for my kids for this theme. Since it's 3rd grade and I teach kindergarten through 4th grade, my kids have had 3 years previously. And so we're building, this is a theme that is building upon learning that they've already had. And so that is part of why I had said I really am focusing in on some previously learned vocabulary. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give another periscope around spiraling your curriculum. So taking themes year by year and bringing, recycling and spiraling old vocabulary into new themes. So be sure that you're following us on Twitter and Facebook so that you see the announcement for that one, which I said will be in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much. I look forward to that conversation. So I've got my goals, and I'm going to start looking at this thematic web and deciding which pieces of it will allow my students to get to the goals that I've established. What activities are going to allow that to happen. And then also, if you remember at the beginning, some of my considerations had to do with my different types of learners. So I'm going to be picking and choosing activities that will meet the needs of my varied learners. So I want to have activities that have to do with multiple intelligences, my different types of kiddos, etc., and the age group. This, as I said, is 3rd grade. So from this, boy, there were lots of fun things that I put up here when I was creating this originally. But since I want my students to learn the chunk ba-ah with destinations, imagining a trip through outer space was, for me, a good way to achieve that. So looking at that spoke on intergalactic travel and taking a trip into outer space seemed like a good way to bring that in. Also, because my kids know a lot of food vocabulary, and I want to recycle old vocabulary and bring it back again, I decided that I would have one of our characters, Mateo, he's a mouse, go out into outer space and look for green cheese, which I found rather hilarious, just for myself, because he's a mouse, and they love cheese, and we have that funny thing about the moon being made out of green cheese. So I thought that would be funny. So I went and I looked at the intergalactic travel portion, and then I asked myself, okay, well, if we're going to talk about a trip into outer space, what will my students also need in order to be able to talk about that? Oh, thank you so much. This is one of my favorite themes, actually. So they're going to need to know the names of the planets and some other objects in the space, in the solar system. So that needed to be part of my theme. So I'm going to bring you back to the thematic web. And so then I'm looking over here in planets. I started with intergalactic travel. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's good. That might be my big theme. So working away from outer space in its entirety and going over here, a trip into outer space. And then, okay, yeah, my kids are going to need to know planets in order to be able to talk about going into outer space. So then I'm going to start picking and choosing some other spokes off of here that will help my kids to learn those. So for example, Los Planetas, the song, that's great. It's also an authentic resource, yay. We might talk about color and size and temperature, because those are also vocabulary words that my kids really know well, but we need to continue to recycle. We might talk about, I love to do some interpersonal pieces, so we might talk about what is your favorite planet. I incorporate that. I do an ordering activity with my kids. I use, here's our activity pack so you can kind of get an idea. I have all these planets that we use, and Mateo goes off, here he is in his spaceship, and we order the planets. It's a great way to practice the planets and practice yes/no questions and either/or questions with my kids. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate all of your feedback in the form of those hearts and your comments. So, as I developed this theme, and I showed you some of the materials that I've created, so we're going to utilize all of these different materials within the theme in the activity pack that we have for this. Welcome. All of these activities that I've developed around that central theme of a trip into outer space. Thank you so much. Starting with a very simple story, but in context. So, then, as I said, my biggest goal for this theme is for my kiddos to create their own version of our story, Mateo el Astronauta. And so I'm going to provide some activities to help them do that, recognizing our goal, one of my sub-goals of Ba'a with destinations. It's such as all of my mini books actually are really, really simple, but Mateo goes off into outer space in search of his green cheese, and then we continue that construction using Ba'a. So I'm going to incorporate, yes it is, thank you for asking, our store Mundo de Pepita. The activity pack is called Mateo el Astronauta, and I just updated actually about a week or so ago with some new activities in it. It's under adventure, I think, or activity packs, but I do this with third grade, and we have so much fun. I love outer space, they love outer space, so it's a fun, highly motivating theme for my students. So that last activity that we're going to do is they're going to create their own version of the story. I do use pattern sentences with most of my mini books, so when my kids recreate this story, I am having them create alternate versions for some parts of the story. So when Mateo goes to Saturno, they get to choose where he goes. Instead of, it could be Saturno, it could be Júpiter, it could be Neptuno, al Sol, that's their choice. And they also have the choice of what he's looking for. Originally, he looks for green cheese, but they can choose anything that he's looking for, whether it be an enormous taco or a tiny pink elephant, their choice. So that process is really important, where you take that bigger thematic web that you've created, where you've brainstormed all of these different ideas and resources and whatever comes to your mind around that big theme, and then you pare it down. You don't use all of it unless you have an incredible amount of time. That's great. I don't. So I'm going to pare down and only use parts of the thematic web that I have brainstormed. And the interesting part about that is that because you've done this brainstorming session with your thematic web, as I said earlier, you may or may not end up with the central working title that you started with, which I started with outer space, and it really kind of moved more into a trip through outer space as opposed to just outer space in general, and that can happen. There are lots of pieces on here that I would love to do. Lots of activities on that big thematic web that are fun, but I can't incorporate all of them into my theme, most specifically for time constraints, but also because they may not meet the language goals that I've established for the theme, right? So having my students be able to recreate, create their own version of a story, and to be able to acquire and practice the structure ba'a with destinations, and thirdly, recycling old vocabulary from the past, blast from the past, I call it often, that's spiraling up the curriculum. So at this point, what you're going to do, you've pared it down, you've got your a basic direction for your theme. So then you've got your activities, you've got your goals, you're going to start gathering your resources and your materials, okay? As I said, all of my activity packs are, the whole thing is kind of done for you. But you're going to, if you're thinking about creating your own, that's what you're going to do. You're going to gather your resources, your materials, and as you're doing that process, you may think of some more resources. You may find some more resources if you're out on the internet, you're on Pinterest. Joshua from World Language Classroom just gave a great tip yesterday on Periscope for giving a tip for teachers, saying, you know, just start a Pinterest board right now. You're not back in school. Maybe you're not thinking about going back to school, but you do come across ideas. Just pin them and save them for later. And I thought that was just a really, really great tip. I'm kind of a Pinterest junkie, so definitely something that I am guilty of. But you might find some more resources than what you've even come up with on the thematic web, and that's really great. So then you're going to think about the order in which you're going to deliver the theme. How will you introduce it? What will come after the introduction? What will come last? How will you wrap up your theme to create kind of a natural ending before you move on to the next theme? I will say that my themes, kindergarten through 4th grade, typically last 4 to 6 weeks for each theme, which looks like 8 to 12 hours of instruction around that theme. I have my kids twice a week, 30 minutes each class. Although the meat of the theme is not necessarily the full class time, lesson time, because we do always do a greeting activity, always, and we do a end of the class activity. So the theme work typically takes 20 to 25 minutes of every class, depending on some other factors like the kiddos and the day and etc. So you go through that process of planning how you're going to deliver the theme, and even as you're delivering the theme, sometimes that will change, but that's okay. You've got your really good direction. You have a good idea, you're sketching it out. And where I start, and so this is not necessarily where you need to start, but it is helpful. I always start with a story, a mini book that I've created. I like that because then it introduces everything in context. So with this theme that I developed, as I said, the mini book that I start with is Mateo el Astronauta, which is also part of our larger pack by the same name. And you could start with a story. Thank you so much. You could start with a game. You could start with a song or a poem that you really like that introduces the vocabulary. Again, one of my overarching things that I take into consideration is that I want to introduce, I'll answer that in 1 second. Thank you. I want to introduce the theme in context. Yes, I do teach in Spanish. I really strive for 90% in the target language in Spanish for all of my classes, kindergarten through 4th grade. It's can be a challenge sometimes, but it can be done. I just did a post a few weeks ago on our blog spot, elmundodepepita.blogspot.com, talking about how to go about teaching 90% in the target language in elementary school. So you can go there. Thank you so much. That's really kind of you. Muchísimas gracias. So you can go to that post and hopefully it will give you some ideas and tips. I find that teaching 90% is both extremely rewarding and, wow, exhausting. Really exhausting, as if teaching little kids is not exhausting enough. But it's been worth it. So as I said, when you're starting a theme, you can start with a mini book, a story, or a song, a poem. I like to introduce it in context. All of mine are really, really simple so that they're comprehensible for my kiddos. And in terms of the flow of a theme, I like to start with listening comprehension, so the story allows for that. But even then, other activities that we're going to do around that beginning, those first beginning classes, when I'm introducing a theme, I do a lot of listening comprehension activities or very simple questions that my kiddos can answer, like yes/no questions, either/or questions, etc. And then I gradually build in production activities as we go. And as I mentioned, I like to spiral vocabulary and content from other years back into my theme. So I might bring back an old game and incorporate some of the new vocabulary into that game, or an old activity that we do in the past, and okay, well, we're gonna throw in some of the new vocabulary. A great example with this theme, Mateo el Astronauta, in terms of bringing back old vocabulary would be, for example, as I said earlier, talking about the colors of the planets. My kiddos know colors, but we need to practice those. So I do an activity where they're listening to the planet names. Remember, one of the things in order for my kids to get to the goal of creating their own version of the story, which is my overarching goal for this theme, is they need to know the planets. So we start with listening comprehension activities that help them learn the planet names. So, for example, I would ask them a question like, ¿De qué color es Neptuno? Okay, so they hear the word Neptuno, but the production piece of it is azul, which they already know. So activities like that to get them listening to and used to using the planet vocabulary, but recycling it with old vocabulary that they already know and are familiar with. And so as we go, I'm going to do activities like that. I might do an either/or, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with how you can teach a story. I use stories. I am not a TPRS teacher, though I do utilize some of the techniques from that. But I might be asking questions from the storyline that are an either/or that have to do with the planets. For example, on the second page, sale de la Tierra y va a Saturno. So I might ask, okay, va a Saturno o Neptuno? So they can give me the answers embedded in the either/or question. Does he go to Saturn or does he go to Neptune? So it's embedded in the question. I love either/or questions. Other activities that I've included in this activity pack and that I would do to help my students to work on that construction ba'a with destinations, we do a small group activity where one person knows where the green cheese is and the other kids in the group have to guess where it is by using that construction. Lots of different activities to build on that theme, which then ultimately has given them enough practice and reinforcement to be able to then create their own version. The last thing that I will do with a theme, and I do grade, I know a lot of elementary teachers don't grade, but I do. All of the specials in my school grade our kindergarten through 4th grade students. So before I launch a theme, I'm going to develop any assessments and rubrics that I will need going through the theme. And that is really important because you want to know not only where you're going in terms of the goal for your theme, but how will you know that your students have gotten there. That ultimately for me is the purpose of assessment, is not so much to say, hey, you don't know something, but rather for me to know what they do know and what they don't know so that I can help them to learn that. All of that happens before you walk into the classroom to begin the theme. It's a lot of planning and a fair amount of work, a lot of work, but it is definitely worth it because then once you get into the theme, you're not scrambling and trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do next? I will confess that there have been times where I've had to do that for a number of reasons. I just haven't been able to get everything in gear, and it is really hard to do it on the fly. But we are human beings too, right? How many rubrics do you have for your students, and is it combined into one? Oh, great question. I have, for each assessment that I do, I have one rubric. I typically do not combine 2 or 3 assessments in one. So for example, trying to grade 2 or 3 different things under one assessment, I find that it's tricky for me to tease out sometimes the different components. So I always, for each of my assessments, I focus in only on one skill that I'm looking for. And then so I have one rubric for that skill. For example, with Mateo, for Mateo el Astronauta, one of the assessments that I do is I do grade their final version, the version that they create of the story. So it's just the ability for them to understand the constructions and the flow of this extremely simple story and be able to recreate it using their own vocabulary. We use a standards-based grading system. So we have 4, 3, 2, 1, 4 being extending, 3 being meets the standard, 2 meaning you need some help, and 1 meaning you need a fair amount of help in order to even get started. So for me, with the mini book, recreation of their story, a 3 would mean that they're able to recreate that version. They know the story well. We've gone over it so many times. We've done a lot of different activities around it. So for example, they should be able to choose 2 to 3 planets, 4 planets, to incorporate into their story. They should know those because we've practiced that over and over again. And what I do is I give choice within structure. So if there are 9 planets, or the planets and the sun and the moon, maybe they don't know all of those, but they probably should know 5, 6, 7, 8 of them and be able to choose from what they know in order to create their version. I'm not trying to say, do you know how to say Saturn in Spanish? I'm saying, of these planets, which ones can you use to recreate this story for yourself? The same with the food vocabulary that they incorporate into their version, because they can choose, as I said earlier, to have Mateo go out and search for whatever they want him to search for. I give them tons of choices, lots of vocabulary that they already know that they can choose from. So I'm not saying, how do you say green cheese? Or how do you say apple? Here are 15 choices. Pick the ones that you know so that you can incorporate them into your story. If a kiddo is really struggling with that a lot, then that's where they're going to fall down on that 1 or 2. And I'm certainly going to be standing there helping them try to get them to move forward with that. I hope that answered your question. So this again, so that is in a nutshell how I go about building a theme. So I think about my overarching ideas. Great, I'm so glad. That's how I go about building a theme. I think of those overarching ideas of how I want, what I want for my students. I then come up with a working title. that I hope will be a good one. I create the thematic web where I'm brainstorming ideas. Whether they're good ones or bad ones is not important to me when I'm creating the thematic web. As I go through, then I will start to pare that down after I've created my goals for my students. And then I'm going to pick and choose what activities on the web are going to allow my students to meet those goals. I might add some other activities or ideas to that as I go. And then I'm going to start developing that theme more concretely in terms of what I'm going to do first, second, third, planning out my theme over time. This was a third grade activity, as I said. I'm sorry, I've said that several times. If this had been a kindergarten theme that I was brainstorming, I certainly would probably be pulling different activities off of that web. And also, as I was creating that web, I might have thought about some different activities that I would do for kindergartners. As we know, kindergartners are very different. They're quite their own little beast. And I would definitely be trying to incorporate far more movement activities. I would be incorporating as many activities that were whole class participation as opposed to individual participation, or where kids have to wait for each one to take their turn. That's not a strength of kindergarten. That's just who they are as learners. Their attention spans are nice and short. So I would be picking and choosing different activities, different ideas for a kindergarten class as opposed to a third grade. My goal would not be a writing activity for kindergarten. My goal might be that they pick up 1 or 2 words, or actually, in fact, with my kindergarten, most of my themes center around listening comprehension, that they're just developing an ear as opposed to a lot of production activities. So if I was brainstorming a thematic web for kindergarten, as I said, even the activities that I put up there might look different than what I would be brainstorming for third grade or fourth grade or older ones. That's a good question. That's a great question. Do you use the same themes every year and just change activities, or different themes each year? I'm going to talk in a couple of weeks about spiraling your curriculum here on Periscope. Definitely be sure that you're following us on Twitter and Facebook so you see that announcement. But there are a couple of themes that I do more than 1 year in a row. Family being one of them. To me, that's just one of those huge topics that you can really grow, and it evolves over the years from really nuclear family to adding some more family members in first and second grade, and then in third grade we do a big theme around pets, since pets are certainly part of our family. But for the most part, at this point, I have been teaching this program for 18.5 years, so I've had a lot of time to develop specific themes for each grade level. That being said, when I started, I did a fair number of themes where it was the same basic theme, but I was adding and growing it each year, like I was talking about with family. More of my themes did that. As I've evolved over time, I've become a little bit more specific with each grade level, and I've created all of these mini books and theme packs that are specific to a variety of goals and ideas, themes for little kiddos. The thing, though, is even if your themes themselves are different, that, as I said, I'm going to talk about this in a couple of weeks, but you're still spiraling the vocabulary. So even though this is outer space, we're going to I incorporate colors, I incorporate numbers, I incorporate size vocabulary. Oh, the verb ace, they know that quite well, but I want to keep recycling that. So I'm bringing back old vocabulary into new themes. But it is my advice, especially if you are either just starting a program, or if you have a huge span. I know many teachers have, like kindergarten through 8th grade or 3rd through 8th grade, where they have tons and tons of preps. I would definitely recommend that you take some core themes and you build and expand upon them through the grade levels. So it's going to make your work a lot easier. And then just like what I did over time, if you're there, you can start to develop some additional themes that maybe are more specific to a particular grade level. But it is an inordinate amount of work to develop themes for lots of grade levels all at once. We only have so much time in the day and in the summer as teachers. So like I said, over time, I've started to really distinguish. You're welcome. It's a really great question. I know a lot of people struggle with that, especially if they're in a new program or if they've got a lot of grade levels. I'm kindergarten through 4th grade, so that's 5 grade levels. Plus I have 2 multi-age classes where it's kindergarten 1st and 2nd all in one class together. And so those classes I deliver a little bit differently. So I do have to prep for them separately. It's an interesting combination for multi-age. So that I hope has given you an idea of how I go about building a theme. I hope that it has helped you, given you some ideas. It will be, I really thank Jill for saying that on Periscope these videos do stay here indefinitely now, but we will also post it on our YouTube channel, Mundo de Pepita, and the paper copy will be in our Teachers Pay Teacher store, Mundo de Pepita. Please follow us on Facebook and Twitter to see the announcement for our next one. Muchas gracias a ti, muchísimas gracias. And I've just really enjoyed having you here. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Muchísimas gracias. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Adiós.